Welcome back to Poland Daily History. I'm in the studio, my guest, Stefan Tompson, and we're talking about President Putin's attempt to blame Poland for the outbreak of the Second World War. Stefan, we've sort of seen this sort of Soviet horror, and of course, it's probably worth saying that when we got to the Warsaw, when the Red Army finally rolled up in Warsaw, because we saw the ultimate final betrayal, well, probably not the final betrayal, but another betrayal of the failure to support the Warsaw Uprising, having broadcast, of course, to arise Poland, liberate your country, and then, rather to everybody's surprise, or maybe not surprise, but to everybody's horror at least, the Red Army sat there and did very little.
Yeah, that's right. On the 1st of August 1944, when the Warsaw Uprising breaks out, the Poles believe they'll be fighting for 3-4 days at most, and that they will be able to welcome, in a sense, I mean, they already knew at this point the realities of communism, but they believed they would be sort of welcoming the Red Army into a liberated, or in the process of being liberated, Warsaw. The opposite happened. The uprising breaks out, the fighting starts, and it goes on for 63 days whilst the Soviet offensive stops on the banks of the Vistula. And I mean, the inhabitants of Warsaw, just before the uprising, they could hear the Soviet artillery in the background. That's how close the Soviets were. And yes, they had been encouraging the Poles to rise up, and in fact, in a sense, both sides, both the Nazis and on the other hand the Soviets, were dealing with their Polish problem. The Soviets were basically letting Warsaw bleed out, letting the pesky resistance, people who probably would not be supportive of communism, bleed out and die in the streets of Warsaw. And they were also letting the city be destroyed. All these sort of bourgeois buildings were being wrecked and were making place for a future sort of ideal communist city. But that betrayal, I think, is particularly brutal and was particularly costly. It cost the lives of at least 200,000 Poles, mostly civilians, and it cost us our capital city a sort of immeasurable cultural losses. Warsaw was destroyed 85%.
And as we know, of course, that was one episode in what ultimately became the Germany was finally defeated, and. Unexpectedly and rather unfortunately, of course, this part of the world, Poland in particular, was subject to 40-odd years of communist regime. But it's worth saying, I think, that actually the fighting didn't stop then, and you're making a new film about the so-called cursed soldiers, these characters who kept fighting for Poland well into the 1950s.
I am indeed. Patrick Ney, the other sort of British filmmaker who works here, and I have teamed up. We've started a fundraiser, and it's going quite well. And we want to make a film documenting the post-war period, 1944 to 1956. It's not just about the cursed soldiers who would go on to fight. Some of these units would last until 56. The very last of these soldiers, Lalush, was killed finally in 1963, died with a gun in his hands. But it's also about the Red Terror, it's about the torture cells of the NKVD, it's about Rakowiecka, it's about the mass graves in Łączka, and it's about the unleashing of this terror directly after the Second World War by the Soviets, by Polish communists. And this is this film we're making. We're making it in English. We're very excited to tell this story. It's a story that hasn't been told. And this incredible, on one hand, the incredible courage of the men and women who fought on, who realized in 1943, 44, 45, as the Soviet advance was moving through Poland, that they weren't going to get freedom, and they were desperate for this free and independent country. But it's also about what the civilians had to endure, what Poland had to endure, and about basically the very nature of communism and of that ideology. And it's an ideology that's broadly misunderstood. It's an ideology that is often misrepresented still to this day, and we would like to set the record straight and tell this story. And I think it's an important story because other stories, such as, for example, everyone knows that the story of the Japanese soldiers who fought on well into the 70s.
Well into
this sort of anecdote, it's sort of it's the sort of fun fact that everyone knows, yet much closer to home here in Poland, in the very heart of Europe. We've got soldiers hiding in forests till 1956, 1963 in the case of a few sort of odd soldiers here and there, but there were active partisan units until 1956 engaging in regular combat with the communist occupier.
Well, that's a story definitely worth telling. And you've made a number of films, because the film I just watched was the film where you talk about about Putin, and that's actually very good.
Thank you.
With the video and
the scope here is much bigger. I mean, here we really want to sort of go full out and really tell this story.
Exactly. So anyway, look, Stefan, thank you very much indeed for joining us in the studio. It's been fascinating. You must come back. We must talk about more of this. There's always so much to say, and so little time in which to say it. Well, thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed these episodes as much as I have, talking to Stefan. And of course, if you want to know more about Polish history in English, come to Poland Daily History. Look at Stefan's films on YouTube. But for goodness sake, don't believe a word Mr. Putin tells you. Thank you for watching.